Hello, everybody. Welcome to Split. Beautiful Split. Yeah, the topic of my presentation today is, let me go to the, okay. So the topic is the harmonized and updated FTL for airplane operations used in emergency medical services, air taxi, and single pilot operations. And this is EASA opinion 2 of this, earlier this year. So being the project manager of this rulemaking task allows me to bring more insight into the deliverables and the whole process and the matter of FTL for these kind of operations, which we call on-demand operations in short. What I would like to focus today is the state of play of FTL in Europe. The question why we propose new rules for air taxi, emergency medical, and so on. The timeline and deliverables of our rulemaking effort, strategic objectives we followed, feedback and criticism which we received during this long process, new structure of subpart FTL which will result after the Commission adopts the new regulation. Tactical objectives we had, some examples, and approach to fatigue risk management. Just the whole thing is for your awareness, information. It's not a regulation yet, it's opinion, which means the EASA phase ended. And now it's the Commission phase to process the proposed text through the institutions of the European Union and to adopt a regulation later this year, we hope that. Well, what is the state of play? I guess you already know, so very briefly today we have already rules for scheduled operations, and they're there from 18th of February 2016, so 10 years. The new rules on demand operations plus single pilot operations, so like I said, not yet harmonized. Currently, they're under subpart Q. There is a mistake here. It's not 2006 regulation 3922. It's 2006 regulation amending the regulation of number 3922 from 1921. So it's a very low, a very old regulation. So in the future, they will be regulated. I mean, after the adoption, we allow for 2 years of transition for the operators and for the authorities to adapt to the new rules. So they have to transition from subpart Q to the new harmonized regulation. Why is this opinion necessary? Because subpart Q is very basic, because it is a one-size-fits-all rule. It applies to everybody, to schedule, to on-demand, to single pilot, everything, without any adaptations. So this is the first and very important reason. Subpart Q does not establish maximum daily FTP for single pilot and for AEMS, which is emergency medical services. Subpart Q does not provide rules for standby, in-flight rest, and split duty. These gaps were covered by the member states themselves member states where the operator has a principal place of business. So there was a divergence in Europe, a great one. So this created lack of uniform level of safety and level playing field in Europe. The rulemaking task with this complex number 0492 and 0493. It started in 2012, so 14 years ago. In the blue rectangles, you can see all the steps that are already completed. So first NPA in 2017, which was submitted to consultation for 4 months. Then we issued a second NPA, which was a focused NPA, which was circulated only to stakeholders, advisory bodies. It lasted for 4 months in 2024. Then we prepared a draft opinion, which was consulted with the member states' advisory bodies in November 25, and EASA committee, which is composed of EASA management, endorsed the proposal in December, and we published in February. In red rectangles, you can see the future steps. So we hope EU regulation and adoption and publication in Q3 this year, and the associated guidance materials, certification, specification, and so on would be possibly, hopefully, published in Q4 this year. What are the strategic objectives and tools? So it's not a secret, it's the very important things for the whole process. We wanted to mitigate the risks linked to the dangerous amounts of fatigue, and by integrating scientific knowledge and best operational practices. We wanted to ensure a level playing field and a uniform level of safety by establishing a harmonized legal framework. And we wanted, by the first two objectives, to reach to positively impact safety and the social and economic aspects of the operations concerned. What criticism and what feedback and criticism we got, because this was a lengthy process and there was the community was involved heavily in the whole in the rulemaking, so they were bringing a lot of expertise and also criticism to our work. With the first NPA, we included HEMS in the proposal, but then we received a lot of calls from this community to exclude HEMS from the scope, because HEMS is deeply integrated into the member states' healthcare systems. So they feared, so those that challenged the proposal, they feared that this will sort of harm the very subtle balance in each country when it comes to HEMS. It's, and their fears were considered really rightful, and so we decided to, and we also decided to exclude HEMS from the scope. Then there were some calls to abandon harmonization, because some people believe that always enough. Whatever the member state has, it's completely sufficient to regulate this. However, our data, studies, and surveys we did showed something, a different picture. They demonstrated different. So we decided to keep the project, however, only on fixed wing operations. Another criticism was that proposals do not sufficiently address specificities. of air taxi, AEMS, and single pilot. So what we did, we teamed up with experts, real experts from this world, and from competent authorities and from the industry. So basically, a lot, 2/3 of the proposals are coming from them. Of course, EASA has a touch at the end, the final word, but yeah. Another criticism is that, that the emergency medical services is very different from air taxi, so they should be regulated separately, like a separate annex on each of them. Separation exists in the current proposal where AEMS needs more flexibility. That's for sure. You can see it. However, we pack them together because if you are not emergency medical service, you are an air ambulance, and for the sake of flight time limitations, you're treated as an air taxi. So if there is no emergency situation, you're a normal operation. Yeah, some criticized that some stakeholders, that the proposals are for air taxi and emergency medical services are more flexible than the requirements for schedule. But of course, they're more flexible because we start from subpart Q. And subpart Q allows them today more flexibility. So we wanted to keep this flexibility. There were concerns about the practical distinction between air ambulance and AEMS, like I said already, why we packed together. And if there is no emergency, you are treated as a normal operation. So we decided to include an extensive guidance material to explain the concept. So, and this concept is not new. You can see the same thing for HEMS. HEMS, the way HEMS is regulated is exactly what we based ourselves on. The way, the philosophy, the logics of the regulation is the same. So, according to our own assessment, no major unresolved concern remain today. So the structure of subpart FTL, the resulting one, not today, tomorrow when the new regulation will be adopted. So you will have a subpart FTL-A. It's split, it's split in A and B. So subpart A stands for airlines, but it's for scheduled operations. And subpart B, like business aviation, for if you wish, it's about the new type of on-demand operations. You under subpart FTL-A, it is the same as today. It's what we have today for airlines, with one addition, however, single pilot. This is new, single pilot scheduled operations here included. Then you have the usual thing, AMC, GM, CSFTL1, GM to CSFTL, not changed at all. Then we have the new proposals on air taxi and AEMS. Again, we have single pilot and two pilot operations. Again, AMC and GM, a CSFTL2, which is the core, actually. This is where you can find the substance there, actually, for the substance of the requirements. And we have GMs to this to explain the rationale behind. What are our tactical objectives? I would come back to them later in the presentation, but very briefly I will note them. We wanted to align with the basic regulation, which was long due since the adoption of the regulation in 2018, was it 20? Yeah, okay. We wanted to achieve regulatory continuity, but modernized. We wanted to be specific for these type of operations, to address their specificities, not to have one rule fits all. We wanted to apply a modern approach to fatigue risk management. We wanted to apply a science-based approach to fatigue. We wanted to consider the socio-economic impact, which is very important in terms of flight time limitations and rest. And we wanted to apply the principle of shared responsibility, which you very well know about. So the alignment with the basic regulation, I would stand out its Article 4.2, which contains some risk protection objectives. And based on these risk protection objectives, we managed to differentiate the approach to air taxi and AEMS. And we managed to propose some targeted fatigue mitigation measures. Targeted means specific to air taxi and AEMS. Why? Because air taxi and AEMS are not open to the general public like the scheduled, because the performance and the operational characteristic of the aircraft is less complex, generally less complex than big guys involved in scheduled operations. The type of and scale of operations are less complex. The passengers for example, the passengers in air taxi are better informed of the risks compared to scheduled operations and to the public, to the general public. So you can find, if you are interested in this, you can find this risk protection objectives in this article, for which states that the agency, the member states and the Commission will issue measures, will propose and issue measures that take account of the risks. So there is a ladder of risks which we have to account for. Another alignment was sought in the direction of IFTSS approval. IFTSS, I think you know this abbreviation, Individual Flight Time Specification Scheme, which is now it's an approval item. So every operator needs to have this into their OM. This is basically Chapter 7, but this is under approval by the competent authority. So we had to align this with the new requirements of the basic regulation. So this led to some amendments. The first amendment is ARO-OPS 235, which is common to any type of operation. So we had to update it to fit the new realities. Now it better clarifies the member states' responsibility in approving IFTSS. We had to also amend ORO FTL 125. This is the operator's responsibility. This is a mirroring provision which defines the operator's responsibility in preparing the IFTSS, and this is for scheduled operators. Then we have the new proposal, which is ORO FTL 126, which is now it's the same like 125, but it's for air taxi and emergency medical services. So these are updated, and the last one is new. The first two, they do not bring anything new because they are long due since the adoption of the basic regulation. This adaptation was long due, and member states know very well about that. So they will apply as from adoption of the new regulation later this year. while this new one will apply 2 years later. I put here 1st of September, but it will depend of the date on which Commission adopts the regulation of 2 years later. Okay, so science-based approach. With the first NPA in 2017, we published a number of, we published a number of scientific documents. The major one is the EBA-ECA study on fatigue in air taxi emergency medical service operations, which was the basis of which formed the basis of our proposals, which was accompanied by by 3 other documents, which are collected data sets. So Barbara and my colleague from FRMSC, they will later on delve into this scientific approach. The red ones are already done, but they will explain to you what they found out. It's a little bit old, but when it comes to science, nothing is old, right? We have to respect the scientific results. The blue circles are the new steps we undertook to prove that the new tables with FDPs and FDPs are suitable for the operation. They would not bring additional fatigue risk. So we did basically two mathematical modeling exercises, which showed that these tables would be fine in terms of not building unacceptable levels of fatigue. What can I say about the regulatory continuity and modernization? It's a little bit two different things, but we had to balance. So we used Subpart Q as a baseline, like I said. We added, the gaps of Subpart Q were filled with what we already know from scheduled operations. So we used also some requirements from CS-FTL1 to fill the gaps and some operational practices. And then we had very serious feedback, which was also taken into account. So what are the specificities? I don't know, maybe briefly, just for your information, what is different, because these operations are really different, not like the airlines. So they are on demand, like I said, majority at short notice, long standby at home. These are air taxi. Frequent change of schedule, long break periods, lower flying hours, considerable use of aircrew and aircraft positioning compared to schedule. On the other side, we have emergency medical services, again, on-demand operation for medical transport of patients who need an extensive and urgent medical assistance. Block hours, duty times, relatively low compared to what the airline pilots have. Considerable use of aircrew and aircraft positioning, again, for AEMS-based operations in particular. What I want to show here is the most important table, the most important table in the new proposal. This is the table on maximum basic FDP for acclimatized crew in 2 pilot, air taxi and AEMS operations. So you see the difference between air taxi, AEMS, and scheduled operations is the first column, which is up to 4 sectors. For scheduled operations, we have this first column up to 2 sectors. And I will explain why later when we talk about positioning. So you can see that the link between the number of sectors, time is up, I have to finish. Oh, I have another, okay. So you can see the link between the number of sectors and FDP duration is relaxed as suggested by the study, which will be covered later on. The table facilitates implementation for duty starting between 6 and 13:29, which is the most favorable time of the day. So the step is reduced, 1 step for them. Not as before, it was multiple steps, which was making the, the whole thing very complex. So FDPs for 1 to 4 sectors in air taxi and AMS are the same as FDPs for 1 to 2 sectors in scheduled charter operations, which may help some operators with mixed operations to adjust their rosters. Recognizing the greater workload when operating more sectors, you can see that the FDPs shortens by 30 minutes for 5 sectors and by 60 minutes for 6 sectors. And every sector beyond 6 sectors is also reduced by 30 minutes. There is an option for deviation from this table, and this option is only if the operator has a fully fledged FRMS. So what enhancements we had with regard to subpart Q? Aircrew acclimatization, and this was very important for air taxi operators. They had they have basically very complex rotations, not like the airlines. So we had to cover these scenarios where they operate for more than for 14 days, if you wish. So they can change the reference time. It's not longer linked to the home base, but it may be acclimatization in another point, in another theater, where they may continue operating, acclimatized to this new theater, and then come back to the home base, which makes this very complex. We updated the transitions, so alternating rotations, east-west, and vice versa. Again, it's very difficult here because you can change your reference time. Onboard rest can be taken in a Class A or Class B rest facility, which is on board. For taking in-flight rest during cruise phase, it's only with augmented crew. But for split duty, for standby, the operators can use the Class A facility on the ground. Standby is no longer fixed up to 16 hours. It may be 24 hours on a continuous basis. And importantly for AEMS operators, this standby does not terminate when you get the assignment for duty. When you return back to the base, the standby can continue. Split duty, this is important because it differs from what we have in scheduled operators. You can have as many breaks as you wish, but only one counts for the extension. And this one is the qualifying split duty break, which allows you to extend the FDP by 1/2 of the extension. Like I said, the assigned home base I didn't say that, sorry. Assigned home base, you know, for the airlines, it's just one airport location, while here we allow for a city airport system. With regard to positioning, what is important here to know is that we allow for a self-driven vehicle, so the pilot, the crew may transport themselves to the reporting point. This is one thing. The second thing is that we include the non-commercial, the ferry flight positioning sector to a pickup location, to a patient or passenger pickup location into the FDP structure. So one leg to the pickup location, 2 cut sectors, the fourth sector back to home base or to another place where they will lay over, when they may have a layover and the next day pick another passenger, is also included in the structure of the FDP. So with one FDP of 4 sectors, you may have 2 sectors which are non-cut, ferry flights, and 2 cut sectors which are carrying passengers or patients. I will skip this because it's very late. I need to allow Barbara more time and more time for questions. This is an example of the transitions, but I won't bother you with this. Is a little bit heavy to explain, and I need more time. So you are free to review this slide and come back to me if you have questions. This is the new approach to alternating rotations, which is very important actually, because we changed the philosophy. Now it's the reference time that leads. To remind you of our approach to fatigue risk management. So within the operator management system, you know very well, we have crew management. Within crew management, we have aircrew fatigue management. And within aircrew fatigue management, we have fatigue risk management. So this is the red circle is the risk exposure component. And this can be done through safety management system or FRMS. And if you have, if you still have, you don't need FRMS for everything, you just need FRMS for a number of things. Like I said, an example is the deviation from the table basic daily FDPs. But if you are a normal operator with a safety management system and you don't deviate, so you basically comply with the rules, but you start flying at night or late arrivals, then you will need appropriate FRM, which will be covered later. So that's not necessary to cover it now. So thank you very much, and I went a bit late, but thank you very much for your attention. Yeah, sure.
Just a quick reminder on questions while we're changing the speakers over. So if you go to Slido, sli.do, and then we have the code, it's #tired2026, then you can ask the questions on that, because we've got quite a large audience online, so we figured it was the best way of managing all the questions between the 500 plus people online and you all in the room, and hopefully that fits nicely. But yeah, we'll keep going like that. And we'll hand straight over to Barbara to do the next part. So Barbara. Sorry.
Yeah, and Cristina. Hello. Hi, everybody. Cristina is gradually taking over from me, so that's why
no pressure.
She's here, and she's going to start off the talk, and I'll finish it off. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I hope you're ready for a little bit of science this early in the morning. Right. So, as Barbara mentioned, this is the research, or the highlights of the research that was carried out by Barbara and Mick Spencer. And when I use the word we, it's very much the royal we, because clearly I wasn't part of the research team at the time, but I can talk about it. So, just to give you a little bit of background, I think Irina has already been quite, covered this fully, why we need different regulations. But basically, the rationale was that we know less about fatigue risk in air taxi and EMS operations, and therefore we need targeted research to address this gap and inform rulemaking. And FRMSC were contracted to carry out this work. So the objectives were to understand what the differences are between these operations and standard CAT operations, to understand whether these features actually increase fatigue or actually reduce fatigue risk, and then to compare the results to understand the differences between the two. So there are four main objectives. One was to identify the risk drivers associated with pilots' reported work and rest patterns. We wanted to understand what the significant predictors of fatigue at duty end were in terms of FTP length, flight time, number of sectors, time of day, the usual ones. And on the basis of that, we wanted to develop a statistical model of these significant predictors so that we could then build a simple models for these two operations, and the results then to be compared with an established model like SAFE, which has is backed up by 30 plus years of evidence within flight ops. Overall, this was really to really fully understand what the key risks were and to assist rulemaking. So in terms of the criteria for participations, there were several ones, obvious ones, which I won't go through, but the most important was that we needed to have a good spread across different operators in these two operations. So we limited to 10 per operator in terms of the volunteers and the participants that we could include. I think it was apt just to increase participations, as you know, in the real world, it's always difficult to get volunteers for these studies. Pilots from non-commercial could also be included, provided that they had operations or they followed European regulations or similar national rules. We worked with the EBAA and the ECA to get the volunteers, recruit them, talk about good sample size and whether the volunteers were from suitable organizations. We then took over in terms of instructing the participants, giving them equipment, etc., as normal. The data were collected across a month, and the study was open for 11 months, initially 4 months, but again, a bit of a struggle to get volunteers, therefore that was extended. In terms of what we collected, so we had subjective data collection tools. We had an online questionnaire with 16 items, questions about work and rest patterns, fatigue levels, whether fatigue affected performance. There were optional questions about health conditions and medication. These were completed 3 times across the month, and the responses, the questions asked participants to think back in the previous 2 weeks. More subjective data collection in terms of an app diary where participants could collect duty data and sleep data. So for duty, timings were important, fatigue at start and end of duty, and at different activities throughout the duty, like top of the tent, and after each of these activities, like positioning, ground duties, waiting time, etc. Workload, hassle factors were also assessed, and any naps. Sleep was assessed in terms of sleep and start and end times, sleep quality, and fatigue rating on waking. We also had objective data collection. So this was done through actigraphy. So participants wore a wrist-worn watch that measures activity and estimates sleep duration. They wore it for a month, except on days off. In the plan, there was also a performance measure, like the PVT, which basically assesses reaction times, but unfortunately we didn't get sufficient data for meaningful analysis. Equally, we had melatonin as a biomarker, or the plan was to assess melatonin, a profile of melatonin as a biomarker to assess circadian phase shift when flying through time zones and to measure readaptation following these transitions. But unfortunately, there were no volunteers for urine data collection. I wonder why. I've had experience of this method of data collection, and even when you get volunteers, it is a little bit of a challenge to get a complete data set. I did get there eventually, but it took me about a year. So I did wonder at that point why I did include that. So we didn't give up on assessing circadian phase changes, however. We went on the next best thing. So we used the proxy, which is basically adaptation of sleep down route, but also adaptation of sleep coming back following these transitions. So it's a proxy measure, is the best that you can get once you can't get a physiological measure of circadian phase. In terms of the results, and those related to the survey, right? So we can see that the pilots were based across 38 airports in 13 European countries. You can see that the differences between air taxi and AEMS were more to do with the maybe lack of diversity in AEMS, but the pilots were from 22 operators, so that was quite a good spread. In terms of demographics, so 78 pilots completed the online questionnaire, of whom 71 also completed the sleep diary suitable for analysis. Most of the participants were air taxi, I think 2/3. Most were male and were 40 on average, a little bit younger for the AEMS pilots. Right, so when asked the question, was performance affected by fatigue? I don't know where fatigue has gone, but there you go. Almost 60% of AEMS pilots said yes, compared to just under 40% in air taxi. And of those affected, more than half reported this occurred once in the last month, and 40% reported it happened several times. Sorry, you can't really see those, but anyway, hopefully you've got the message there. In terms of factors contributing to fatigue, you can see that there is some overlap in terms of the top 5 fatigue factors between the two operations. So both AEMS and air taxi pilots cited long duty hours, poor sleep, high workload, and night duty in terms of fatiguing factors. But then the differences were that AEMS pilots cited early starts as a fatigue factor, whereas air taxi mentioned the time zone changes. And that's very much reflecting the two operations. In terms of the diary data, there was this subsample that collected objective sleep data, 57 of them, and we had a complete data set for those who did subjective and objective data collection. And we just wanted to see what the correlation was between the two methods. And we can see here that there is a strong correlation between subjective and objective sleep. And the shared variance is 87%, which is quite high. And you can see that in the diary, people tend to overestimate sleep, which is quite a usual finding in studies of this kind. But as a side point, it actually goes to show that subjective data collection, sleep data collection, is actually a good indicator of how much people are getting, how much sleep people are getting around the roster in the absence of objective data tools. Okay, so that's interesting. I don't know, I think the slides are getting fatigued. Apologies about that. But this is just to show you how many pilots basically took part in this bit of the data collection. So there were 87, again, mostly were air taxi, and you can see that from the tables as well. Rates of working, same thing, apologies. Okay, so this is quite important, just looking at the rates of working, and you can see from these, especially from the average hours per year, is that the rate of working is lower compared to standard CAT operations, and there is more standby as well compared to CAT operations. And looking at the differences between different operations, EMS and air taxi, you can see that EM pilots fly longer hours with longer FTPs compared to air taxi pilots. And this is showing the distribution of FTPs over 24 hours, so by time of day. So you can see that there is a prevalence of day work in the graph, as you can see, but for EMS pilots, that tends to extend into the evening and then into the night. So at this point, I'll hand you over to Barbara for the juicy bits.
Thanks, Cristina. Oh, sorry, we didn't put this in. This is transferring data onto other people's computers. Right.
No, we didn't have that.
No. Right. Oh, that's gone. Go back. Okay, fine. Okay, so in terms of multiple sectors, that's obviously an important, very important factor. We've heard that from Irina earlier. In terms of what do these pilots do, 35% of all the FDPs were single sector, and another 34% two sector. So majority were either one or two sectors, and only 6% were more than four sectors. There were less emergency medical service operations that were only single sector duties, only 17%. And there were, if you flew more than one sector, then the duty hours increased, unsurprisingly, from sort of 6 hours for a mean duty for a single sector to more than to 12 for if you've got 4 or more. And in terms of the total flying hours, again, this was between 4 and 6. So I think we've already said this. Oh, no, this is consecutive. This is, so if you look at consecutive flight duty periods, there are actually, in terms of sequences, there were a number of them that were one flight duty period was not followed immediately by another, and there were 44% of those, which reflects the sort of less working hours that they do. And single FDPs, however, were less common in the emergency medical service operations. And there were only 17% of the sequences that had as many as 4 or more duties. So this is probably another difference from commercial air transport that we observed. Right, so we asked at the start of each flight duty period, we actually asked the pilots whether they had recovered from their series of duties on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being fully recovered and 10 being not at all recovered. And you can see that actually a large majority of every group reported being fully recovered, so sort of 80% combined felt they were fully recovered, and there were actually very few that had a score of more than 4. So that does imply that they're perhaps not as fatigued as commercial air transport again. Right, so one of the things we were asked to do was to actually create a statistical model of the data in order to determine the effects of the individual factors, correcting for the other factors, other significant factors, and also so that we could then compare the results with models from other types of operations, so we could compare with commercial air transport. The models used, this is Mick Spencer's topic, he's not here, so please don't ask me questions about that. They were mixed model analysis of variance regression with pilot as a single random factor. We also looked at the length of duty, number of flights, duration of other activities, particularly standby, and the type of operation. So was there any difference between EMS, air taxi, etc.? So each thing we looked at, did it differ between the operations? So, right. So so based on initial calculations, we created a simplified model. And these activities that we looked at were positioning. We had types A and B, and that was ground positioning and air positioning. We looked at how much time was actually in flight, that was actual stick time, and other activity was everything else. So we sort of divided it like that. And then and what we found was that in terms of the effect on fatigue, that positioning, although it didn't actually spend that many hours, if you looked at the number of hours spent on positioning, there weren't that many hours, but every hour spent positioning contributed 0.25 to the fatigue score. So positioning was considered to be fatiguing. And actually, if you look at the sort of positioning they do, it isn't surprising. They might have to drive somewhere, take a TGV, fly somewhere. It's much more complicated than for commercial air transport. And for every hour of flying, that contributed 0.13, and for every hour of other activity, about 0.06. So that was what we found in terms of the model that we used. But there were no significant differences in these factors with the type of operation. So in terms of emergency medical services, air taxi, or the commercial jets, the sort of non-commercial, as we call it, but that's corporate jets, I think it's probably what most people understand. In terms of time of day, very similar to that found in other aircrew. Nothing special here. You can see the actually correcting for the amount of activity. Here's the mean levels at the end of an FTP, and it's what you would expect, no different from what you found in commercial air transport. In terms of the number of flights, the number of consecutive duties, the number of flights or the number of sectors had no significant effect on fatigue after correcting for the amount of activity. This is in contrast for commercial air transport, and I know Irina's done a study that has confirmed our study 20 odd years ago, that the importance of number of sectors in commercial air transport. There was, it does look to be a slight increase, but it wasn't actually significant. In terms of the number of consecutive duties, again, there wasn't any effect of having consecutive duties on fatigue. So above and beyond the actual duration of the duty. So having consecutive duties on their own was not a factor, which I know is important for the rulemaking. In terms of jet lag, unfortunately, it was just chance. You chose people who weren't going on holiday, so that may have affected the yearly rates, of course, because it was no good having pilots who said they were going to go on holiday for a month. So they didn't go on holiday, and unfortunately there were insufficient number of long-range flights to carry out a meaningful analysis. And we did try and gather more data. COVID got in got in the way, and again, we didn't do that, but pleased to see that you've come to an agreement on the time zone change and the gradual adaptation that you find in these sort of operations. We did have some description and descriptive data, but all that showed was basically they were the same as you'd expect. West is best. So in summary, obviously I've come to the end. There were three main components related to fatigue. There was the time of day effect that you'd expect, peak fatigue in the middle of the night or early morning hours, more correctly, the length of the flight duty period, and the proportion of the time taken up by flying or travelling and positioning were the main factors causing fatigue. Typically, the balance between flying and non-flying was equally divided during the duty period. There were very few duties that had a ratio of more than 4:1 flying to non-flying, which is probably again a contrast to commercial air transport. Yeah, EMS worked harder, essentially. Don't need to go, you can read that, don't need to read that for you. But there weren't any difference between the different roles in terms of the strength of the different factors that contributed to fatigue, although the EMS crews definitely worked harder. And the same model applied across all the operations. We then compared it with a commercial air transport model. We based it on a duty starting at 10 in the morning, assumed 50% flying, and what you can see is the red is the safe prediction, and the blue is the data that we got from this. And you can see the fit is very close. We thought it wasn't worth developing a specific model for this group of pilots. The only thing is if you've got very long duties, then SAFE does predict higher fatigue, but none of these duties, because there were basically two pilot operations, went into the range of such long duties. So I think probably I can just flip through these because I've gone over my time. I think I've said all this. Positioning during an FDP is especially fatigue. Yeah, pick that up. Yep. Right. You got time? Okay, fine. Right. I think this is the big thing that actually in emergency medical services and air taxi operations, both types, corporate jets and commercial, the workload is relatively low, both in terms of flying hours, in terms of total days free of duty, and in terms of consecutive days of duty. It's much more unpredictable, which of course interferes with home and family life, but in terms of the actual flying time, it is less. Hence, different regulations are appropriate. And most importantly, no significant effect as long as you control for flying time with a number of sectors. So we felt, based on these considerations, it wasn't for us to propose, but we felt that it wasn't unreasonable to suggest you could relax the link between the maximum FTP and the number of sectors. I'm not quite sure whether you've done this, Irina, in terms of permitting 1 hour extensions outside the WOCL, but maybe there's other things here. And also perhaps relaxing the link between minimum rest and the duration of previous duty, which you have done. Excellent. So we thought these were... We didn't make any recommendations on time zone changes, but we did suggest that maybe they were, although you're unacclimatized to home base, you are acclimatized to somewhere, and maybe it's a good use of a biomathematical model, if you've got one, or a limited biomathematical model that will calculate where you are in the world will be useful, rather than perhaps rely on somebody calculating it late at night when they're tired. So maybe a model will be good use of a model. So thank you very much. I'll ask for questions.
Stay seated, and then Irina, if you want to come up and take a seat as well, and then we'll go through, we can show the Slido, and then we can go through some questions for Irina, Cristina, and Barbara. There's the Slido code again, if you've forgotten it. So the first one from Matthias from ECA, to Irina. The opinion relies on an impact assessment from the 2017 MPA. Are the assumptions on air taxi operators still valid 10 to 12 years later?
Yes, why not? I don't know whether you know how the impact assessments work. Actually, they tell you whether you should go or should not go in a certain direction you have planned to go. So this impact assessment told us that by harmonizing the rules, we will hopefully bring more safety into the system. It didn't say that the operators will be negatively, economically, or socially impacted. So it didn't say that. So we have to trust the impact assessment, which told us that this move will be beneficial for the operations, and this is currently valid.
And maybe just also to add is we then have also as part of our process a kind of post, any action in the EPAS, we have a post process that then says, was this correct, and reviews that as well. So it kind of closes the loop a little bit from a process perspective. So if we go to the next one, so from Matthias, the opinion allows more flexibility than CAT FTL. What level of oversight will NCAs need in air taxi where many operators are smaller and less mature?
Yeah, this is a question for my colleagues in oversight, but I would reply this way. Competent authorities, they are currently responsible to establish their oversight programs according to the risks. So comparing the risk with a scheduled operator and an air taxi, for example, operator, they have to adapt their oversight program and do the inspections accordingly. So I'm not saying you should do the same thing everywhere. I'm saying each authority establish its own safety oversight program according to the risk. This is in the basic regulation. This is a responsibility that already exists, and they are used to it.
And maybe just also to add to that, we have various standardization forums with national authorities, also then to kind of help understand where there are challenges and how we can work together to make it as effective as possible. And, particularly in the implementation phase of different rules and things like that. And then also in the EPAS, we have this new category of action called, not new anymore really, called implementation support, where then if there's a need for specific targeted support for NAAs, then we have the ability to flex that within the system. So hopefully that helps.
And Irina, is it not correct that because of the unpredictability of the operations, actually they have to manage fatigue perhaps more, or at least as well as commercial air transport? I think it's quite an important issue for them, even small operators.
I mean, that could be a hazard in itself, couldn't it? The fact that it is unpredictable.
Yeah, I think the question was more of how the authorities deal with, because the risk of unpredictability should be contained by the operator, but the authority, so this was comparison, how do we oversee these operations compared to the scheduled operations, which are riskier and more complex and things like that. So this is not new. Authorities, they are perfectly aware what they have to do to establish their oversight program.
The next question is actually to you, Barbara. Does your 2015 study adequately cover the new FTL rules proposed in the opinion, or are there aspects that may require updated scientific information?
Well, I guess if one could discover that the rates of work had gone up, I mean, that's the only thing that this was done all those, if somebody could say the rates of work has gone up, we'd be happy to do another short diary study to check this. But other than that, I don't see why they should have done. I don't think operations have changed.
Would that be dependent on the operator? Would that be dependent on the operator to actually check whether the rates of working is higher than the average, which is what really the rules are based on? As we know, they're based on the average. So it could be different from the average, and at that point, assessing the risk would be the approach, I guess.
And if you do, and it's always true in science, if you do a study another time, you'll always get slightly different results. So I'm sure there would be something that would come out slightly different, but probably not significantly different.
Well, it's a bit strange question. Why? Because you couldn't predict what rules we will come
No,
with.
right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. I think that's covered that one. So, what's the policy about practice when operators switch between non-commercial, private and commercial operations on the same day to extend crew working hours? So I presume the suggestion that you would be flying a flight under commercial rules and then decide to...
In terms of FTL? Or in
effectively
principle?
switching regimes from commercial operations to non-commercial.
Well, it's the operator responsibility, but apart from the operational rules, which may be a little bit different, in terms of FTL, everybody knows that the pilot has the responsibility to record all flight times and inform the operator, even if these flight times are recorded in a non-cut operation. So I don't know.
Well, I'm thinking as a kind of data geek who used to run the analysis team, I'm imagining something that would show up reasonably easily in data if you were doing an audit, if you suddenly found that you were doing the last 3 hours of flight of every day was suddenly on non-commercial operations. You kind of...
I want to make a very important statement here. We had included the ferry flights into the FDP structure. So if up to now, the ferry flight to when the pilot positioned himself or herself and the airplane to another location to pick the passenger, up to now was a non-cut and was outside FTL, and could have been for 20 or more hours. Now it's into the FDP structure, which means that now we have FTL covering also non-cut sectors, which is important for containing fatigue levels. Very important. So if you position yourself and then you do a commercial flight, and this lasts, like the study showed, that may last until 24, 25 hours. Now it won't happen with this, because we say ferry plus cut plus ferry is 4 sectors which are under the FDP maximum 13 hours, the basic one, if not extended. But anyway, 13 hours, in the most favorable time of the day.
Cool, thanks. We'll move to the next one. So what's to stop an air taxi operator moving their operation outside Europe but operate in Europe to access weaker FTL? So in a sense, Clinton and I talked about this beforehand, in a sense, nothing. It's a common challenge. It's something we've seen for many years. There's been lots of discussion about aircraft registered on the fringes of Europe, particularly San Marino has been one, the Isle of Man, Bermuda. One of the things that's been interesting that there's been quite a lot of change recently with, particularly with N-registered aircraft operating outside the US. The FAA originally set it up in order to show that the way that works. But what they've then found is more recently the FAA have shut down more and more of those situations where, I don't know if you've seen, but a lot of trusts that operated N-registered aircraft got shut down overnight after a lot of pressure to the thing, from different countries around the world. Clint, do you want to go into present those? There we go. We got it better. Okay.
John, sorry. Is this implying that outside there are weaker FTL requirements?
That's the implication. potentially? The classic regulatory
No,
shopping.
we did a comparative analysis, which shows that, okay, it cannot be compared completely because sometimes we have to compare apples to pears, but it's, I mean, the overall concepts were compared, and we did this very meticulously because we were challenged by the unions that they claim this is very flexible in Europe compared to the outside world. So Europe is going to a more relaxed regime. And we did this comparative analysis to show that this is not the case. Basically, we have a different approach, but I wouldn't say weaker are ours or others' FTL regimes. We cannot say that. There are different elements of comparison, but the concepts are there and they can be compared. And I cannot say that this is not true to say you can move in a search of a more flexible or more favorable regime. It's not true.
And there are much wider strategic situations at play that choose when somebody does that. And we do quite a lot of analysis of particularly safety data involving aircraft registered outside Europe versus registered inside Europe. It's like, say, when I was running the safety analysis team, we were continually monitoring things like accidents involving unregistered aircraft and other countries to see indeed and show that the situation that Irina talked about there was indeed the case. So we move on to the next one. Could you state again the duration of the study and the year the study was conducted?
Well, it was the main study was about 4 months. We did, as I say, try and do some more later, but as I haven't reported that, I won't talk about that. We completed it. I think it was 2014. There was a publication given to the Aerospace Medical Association. I think that would be 2014. If everybody wants to see that abstract.
I think overall it was 11 months. It was extended from 4 to 11, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. Then the next one, reference to the study, did you address the difference between the terms fatigue and tiredness, and have the subjects been explained about the term?
How long do you have? Come and find us later.
Yeah, maybe a discussion.
The short question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a difference myself. You know, extremely tired and slightly fatigued. I mean, it's all depends on what you put in front. I don't think there is. They were given scales to fill in that had clear descriptors for each scales, the Samparelli and the Karolinska. So, you know, I don't think there was any difference. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thanks. The next one, how are long-haul and ultra-long-haul flights with enlarged FCM 3 or up to 4 pilots regulated? Question mark. I think that's a slightly different question to the question.
It's a different answer about ULR, is it?
Well, we have a basic rule for 2 pilots, one for single pilot, for 2 pilots. So if more pilots are involved, which is an augmented crew operation, they are addressed in the proposal. So there are different FDPs that do not depend on the reporting time. So, they do not depend on the time of the day, like for a normal operation. So basically the logic is the same as for scheduled operations. Augmentation by 1 more brings you to a larger FDP. Augmentation by 2 more brings you to even larger FDP, because there is this requirement to have in-flight rest for everybody during the cruise phase. So we follow the logic that if you are allowed to rest in flight, the FDP can be enlarged.
I don't think anybody in Europe does ULR, do they?
Sorry?
Ultra long range, I don't.
We don't call this ultra long. We don't call this ultra long range. What is ultra long? What is long?
We could do.
It actually allows you to cover long operations, even if they are ultra long. What's the point if saying something is ultra long compared to what?
I mean, maybe it's something if anybody wants to ask the question afterwards to follow up if they want a more detailed one. The next one, is there any work going on with the EASA regarding flight time limitations, duty time or fatigue management for remote pilots operating UAS? So again, Clint and I talked about this. Maybe you, do you even...
This is again my responsibility. It's... listen, we cannot cover everything, even if we want to. It's very difficult. You saw this last rulemaking lasted for more than 10 years. It's very complex. And what is complex is not to fix the figures here and have values here and there. It's the complexity consists of balancing the approach to match the operation and social and economic requirements. So even if we want to provide rules for that, we cannot at the moment. That's the answer.
And I think that as a follow-up, something Clint and I were just talking about is that at the moment, I think that the operating model for a lot of the remote pilot operations just aren't clear enough to assess anything at the moment anyway. So as the industry evolves,
so today we have remote pilots, but tomorrow we will have just a supervisor or controller who is not a remote pilot at all. I mean, the operations move into more automated regime.
And if it helps, I was in the Air Force before coming to EASA and answering these questions as everything from small handheld drones used by the Army to Reaper, Watchkeeper, some of the bigger UAVs. And it was a continually evolving question because the systems and the way we were using them in that context, and it's the same with this.
What I can say is, what's the point in regulating remote pilots now? Well, in the future, they will disappear. So very soon, this type of duty will disappear. It won't be anymore a remote pilot, like I said.
Cool. Let's move on to the next one. We've got a few more. Will it be possible to request NAA approval of an IFTSS compliant with FTLB before September 2028 once the standard is approved? That sounds very technical.
That's a good question, but we allow 2-year transition, not only for the operator, but also for the authority to adapt. So, okay, it's possible, but it depends on the authority, readiness.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Perfect, thanks. Question for Barbara. What is the impact of pilot age on the fatigue scientific studies?
We didn't find any significant effect of age. The trouble is that age is complicated by experience as well. So with added age, you get extra experience. And also, interestingly enough, if you actually look at sort of simple sleep deprivation studies, older people are actually more resilient to a night of sleep deprivation in terms of the reduction in their performance to younger people, although obviously the performance is lower the baseline performance is lower. So I think it is complicated, and obviously you do have limits on how old pilots can be as well.
Yes, also.
Yeah.
And that's also the healthy shift worker bias, which means that around 50 people leave that can't cope. And therefore, it makes it look like you're better when you get older, when in actual fact, the ones that are left are better at coping with shift work or jet lag, for example. Yeah. So it is a little bit mixed and really difficult to understand. You need good stats to really understand the effect size of age on fatigue.
Cool, thanks for that one. So we go to the next one. Is it possible, oh no, we've done that one, sorry. Oh, messed that up, sorry. One thing, just to remind you, any questions we don't answer as we go through the next 2 days, we'll take away and we'll provide a summary of things based on all the questions as well. So it's not that if we don't get to anything, we won't do. There have been discussions about publishing guidance for HEMS and FTL. Is it a room already available? Go on then, you do this one.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So just short answer. There's nothing in the pipelines yet, but there has been a lot of work that has been done, as Irina explained. The original proposal contained HEMS. We had to remove. We did some work over the past 2 years. We even worked on a concept paper. Hopefully, we're in discussions and to use the work done in the concept paper to publish. I wouldn't say guidance, but maybe promotional material. That's the most accurate answer I can give.
Promotion material, I love it. We're there. And then, oh, sorry, I'll do that. And then we take one last question, and we're perfectly timed for the break. In the 24-hour standby scenario, is there also accommodation for the use of commander's discretion?
Sorry, but I think that there's a mixture here of concepts. So standby, you can spend the standby in accommodation outside the aircraft or in the aircraft in Class A rest facility. Commander discretion is, like Francesco said in the opening speech, it's an exceptional thing to extend the FDP under certain conditions. So it has nothing to do with standby. But if it happens to be, if you have to take your commander's discretion to extend the FDP while you're on standby, yes, you can spend the standby in accommodation or Class A facility. So it's not covered specifically this scenario, but by logic, yes, you can spend you can take the decision to enlarge the FDP while on standby in a Class A facility, if you wish, this way. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Thanks to Irina, Barbara, and Cristina.